Not all legends are carved in stone. Some walk among us in worn boots and quiet silence. Let us know in the comment section below, have you ever witnessed a moment where respect spoke louder than words? Willy Jennings didn't like to make a fuss. He'd lived long enough to see medals tarnish, uniforms fade, and parades turn into paperwork. At 74, he walked slower, his right foot dragging just slightly, an old injury from somewhere most people couldn't pronounce and never wanted to be. He didn't bring it up, not in the grocery store, not at the barber shop, not even to his grandson Ethan, who thought his grandpa just had a funny way of walking. Willy had arrived at the Lincoln Air Show that morning alone. He wasn't invited, didn't register, didn't RSVP. He hadn't even told his daughter he was coming. She would have made a thing of it, driven in from Omaha, gotten them both matching T-shirts and VIP passes. That wasn't Willy. He preferred the periphery, always had. The entrance was a mess of families, selfie sticks, strollers, and sunblock. Flags waved, announcers boomed over the loudspeakers, and military recruiters handed out stickers that would never stick once the heat set in. Willy had no interest in stickers. He tried walking toward the folding chairs labeled veteran seating, registered guests only. A young guard, barely shaving age, stepped in front of him. "Sir, do you have your badge?" Willy paused. He reached into the pocket of his old field jacket and pulled out a battered leather wallet. Inside was a military ID, the kind with corners curling up from age, like old photographs or a dollar bill that had seen one too many machines. The guard squinted at it and shook his head. "I'm sorry, sir, this area is for pre-registered veterans only." Willy didn't argue, just nodded once, slow, and tucked the wallet back where it came from. He turned without a word and walked off, past the barricades, past the vendors selling plastic jet planes, past the laughter. He found a spot behind a wire fence near a chain of porta-potties. Not ideal, but you could still see the sky from there, and for Willy that was enough. For now. A few yards away, Lieutenant Avery Grant watched the old man settle down on a low concrete lip near a water pipe. She was sipping a soda and checking wind direction for the afternoon showtime when she noticed him. The jacket. The quiet. The way he watched the airfield like he'd been there before. Before the tents and banners, maybe even before the pavement. She didn't say anything at first, but she kept glancing over. Willy didn't notice her. His eyes were on the planes. Not the ones parked in static display. The ones circling above. The Raptors. F-22s. Sleek. Loud. Capable of slicing the sky in ways that made you feel something in your chest. Back in the day, he'd worked under a different kind of thunder. C-130S, AC-47, Spookies. Ground-based air control, silent hands guiding noise and firepower like a puppeteer nobody sees. Avery sipped again. She could have just let it go. She had duties. Escort some kids around the tarmac, prep a short speech for the Gold Star families during intermission, but the image of the man sitting alone kept pulling at her. Something about the stillness in his frame. Like he wasn't just watching the planes, he was remembering them. She crossed over, making her way along the edge of the fencing. When she reached him, she offered a simple, "Good morning." Willy looked up, nodded, said nothing. "You here for the show?" she asked, trying to sound casual. He gave a slight shrug. "Just watching." Avery smiled politely, unsure how to proceed. "You served?" she asked after a pause. Willy tilted his head slightly, as if considering whether the question deserved an answer. Then he nodded. "Vietnam," he said. That was all he said, but it was enough. Avery glanced at the old field jacket, then leaned in a bit. "You know, my uncle was over there. Da Nang. Marines." Willy looked down at his boots. Hard place. The silence settled again. The announcer's voice boomed in the background, welcoming guests and hyping the afternoon flyovers. Families cheered. Kids ran with paper flags. But Avery kept her eyes on Willy. "Did you try the veteran seating area?" she asked carefully. He didn't answer right away. "They said I wasn't on the list," he finally said. "Didn't register." Avery's brow furrowed. Something about the way he said it, without anger, without bitterness, made her chest tighten. Like it wasn't the first time someone had overlooked him, and probably wouldn't be the last. She took a step back. "Wait here a sec," she said. Billy didn't respond, didn't nod, just turned back toward the sky. Lieutenant Avery Grant moved like she was on a mission now, not because anyone ordered her to, but because something about that man wouldn't let her walk away. She was young, but not green. She'd been trained to read faces, postures, eyes. That old man's face had the calm of someone who'd already survived too much. It wasn't humility. It was something heavier. She cut through the security checkpoint near the main tent, waving her badge without a word. Inside, the air was thick with logistics chatter, clipboards, laminated schedules, and radio squawks from all directions. Senior Master Sergeant Derek Moore stood at the center, overseeing the pre-show flight adjustments with the intensity of someone used to being listened to. "More," Avery called, her tone sharper than usual. He turned, clearly not expecting to be interrupted. "What's going on, Lieutenant?" "There's a veteran sitting on the ground near the east fence. Says he wasn't allowed into the reserved section because he didn't register." Derek sighed. "If he didn't register, there's not much we can do. You know how tight seating is." She stepped closer. "With all due respect, sir, I think this one's different." "How so?" "He didn't say much. But he's Vietnam. Air Force, I'm pretty sure. And there's something about him, I think you should take a look." Derek studied her face for a moment. He knew Avery wasn't prone to overreaction. If she was this persistent, something was up. "Fine. Where exactly?" She pointed. 5 minutes later, they were walking shoulder to shoulder through the gravel along the edge of the spectator zone. When they reached the spot, Willy was still there, sitting like a statue. "Same position?" Same far-off look in his eyes. Moore paused a few feet away, adjusting his posture out of habit. "Sir?" he asked. Willy looked up, slowly. No flash of surprise, just acknowledgement. "You a vet?" Moore asked. "Was," Willy answered, quiet. "What branch?" "Air Force. Combat Controller." Moore blinked. That wasn't just any old title. Combat controllers were elite. Quiet professionals who operated behind enemy lines to coordinate airstrikes, drop zones, and medevacs. Ghosts with radio. "Vietnam?" Moore asked, more respectfully now. Willy nodded once. "He should be up front with the other vets." "They said I wasn't on the list," Willy said, the corners of his mouth twitching just enough to suggest he wasn't hurt, just used to it. Moore glanced at Avery, then back at Willy. "Do you mind if I ask your name?" "Willy Jennings." Moore pulled out his phone and started typing. After a moment, he looked back up. "Staff Sergeant William E. Jennings, awarded the Air Force Cross 1969. That you?" Willy didn't answer. He just looked Moore in the eye. "That's you," Moore said again, but this time softer. "You helped redirect fire missions during Operation Apache Snow. You held the comms under fire when your team was ambushed. You didn't leave until everyone else was lifted out. I read that citation in tech school." Willy looked down at his boots again, as if embarrassed. Moore turned to Avery. "Get him a seat." "Sir, we don't—" "Then make one." Willy raised a hand. "I'm fine here." "No," Moore said firmly. "You're not." He tapped his radio. "I need a chair and veteran tag brought to the forward section. Section A1, front row." The reply crackled through the static. "Copy that. On the way." Avery gave Willy a small smile. "Come on. You'll be able to see everything a lot better from the front." Willy hesitated. His hand brushed the fabric of his coat. Then, slowly, he stood. As they walked toward the front, families began to notice. People shifted. Some stood. A couple of kids asked their parents who the man was. No one had an answer yet. The chair was already waiting when they arrived. center row, right beneath the announcer's tower. Willy sat down slowly. The sky above seemed wider from here. The roar of the jets hadn't started yet, but the atmosphere was tightening. The show was minutes away. Moore leaned in. "Sir, thank you for your service." Willy nodded once. "Thank you for noticing." Moore turned and left. Willy sat still. The first F-16 screamed overhead in a blur. The crowd cheered. Cameras clicked. Children pointed skyward. But Willy didn't move. His eyes traced the path of the aircraft the way a sculptor might study a block of marble. Not with awe, but with recognition. To most, it was a show. To Willy, it was memory. He saw more than planes. He saw missions launched in the dark, coordinates scribbled in blood, voices crackling through the radio just before the world turned red. He blinked slowly, then refocused. Mason. His grandson's face flashed in his mind, the way the boy always asked questions he couldn't yet answer, maybe someday. Then came the sound. Not just a roar, but something different. The F-22s. Formed up like silver spears, they tore across the sky in precision formation. People gasped. Avery, standing behind Willy, reached for her earpiece. The voice inside whispered something urgent. Her eyes widened. "Sir," she said, leaning toward Willy. "They're breaking formation." Willy didn't respond. He was already watching. One of the Raptors peeled off from the tight diamond. It looped back, slow, deliberate, then rolled its wings. Twice. The entire crowd seemed to freeze. A maneuver not on the program, not in the schedule, not authorized without direct command. But it happened. The announcer stammered through his mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've just witnessed a deviation from today's planned flight path." The pilot's voice came through Avery's radio. "Or, Staff Sergeant William Jennings, Combat Controller, United States Air Force. We honor your service." And then the jet streaked upward, carving a vertical arc into the clouds. Willy stood. And his hand came up to his brow in a quiet, dignified salute. No one moved. One by one, the crowd followed. Fathers, mothers, children, pilots, security guards. No words. Just silence. And then, a standing ovation of stillness. The applause never came in the traditional way. No whistles, no cheers. Just a kind of reverent silence that stretched long and deep like a chapel had been dropped over the airfield. It was the kind of stillness that made children hush without being told. Willy Jennings stood with his hand raised, his old frame as steady as it could be. The wind tugged at his jacket, and for a moment, just a moment, he looked taller than he was. The fighter jet that had peeled from formation was already a smudge in the sky, looping back into the tight diamond above, but the impact of its gesture hadn't faded. Avery Grant stayed behind him, her throat dry, not from nerves, but from awe. She'd been around long enough to know these shows stuck to the second. No pilot would have gone off program without purpose. No pilot would have done that without a reason. And now, the entire airfield was seeing the reason. A voice behind them, small, a child's, broke the hush. "Who is he?" The mother leaned down, brushing hair behind the girl's ear. Her head is someone we forgot. Willy heard it. He didn't flinch, didn't react. But somewhere behind his eyes, something shifted. Ethan would have liked that line. The air show continued, the sounds coming back in measured layers. The soft drone of the announcer trying to recover, the thrum of speakers playing patriotic music, the murmurs of the crowd trading speculation and whispers. But something fundamental had shifted. People were now looking at Willy more than they were looking at the planes. It started slow. A few spectators drifted toward the reserved section's perimeter, pretending to snap photos of jets but angling their lenses toward the man in the field jacket. Then came the more direct ones, teenagers who approached, hesitant, asking, "Excuse me, sir, were you really in Vietnam? Or, are you the reason the plane turned?" Willy answered the first few with soft nods, brushing off the questions like bugs. But he never answered the second one. The reason didn't matter. The moment had already passed into something else. Legacy. Moore returned from the command tent, where chaos had momentarily erupted due to the unscheduled flyover tribute. He approached Willy and Avery with a clipboard in hand and a smile that looked almost sheepish. "They want to know," he said, "if you'll stay for the flag presentation, the final ceremony." Willy looked at the rows of chairs. He rubbed the back of his neck. "What for?" Moore lowered his voice, conscious of how many people were watching. "Because they've never saluted someone in person who earned the Air Force Cross. Because people forget things. And maybe today—" "They don't want to forget." Willy gave no answer. Avery stepped in. "It's your choice, but I think you changed something today." "I didn't change anything," Willy said, eyes fixed on the horizon. "I just showed up." But even as he said it, something in his voice broke. Just a little, like rust flaking off metal that had stayed silent too long. A young man approached next. Mid-30s, soft civilian clothes, nervous hands. "Exercised?" "I just wanted to say thank you, sir. My dad served in the 101st. He never talked about it. But you, being here, makes me feel like I understand him a little more." Billy didn't say thank you. Didn't pat him on the shoulder. But he did something better. He looked the man in the eye and gave a slow nod, the kind of nod that said, "I know," without needing a single word. The crowd around the section kept growing. Security was starting to edge in now, trying to maintain walkways and avoid a pileup, but it wasn't chaos, it was reverence. Everyone moved slower, spoke softer, like they'd stumbled into a moment too sacred to disturb. Avery stepped to the side, placing a quick call on her comms unit. "Ma'am?" The voice on the other end replied. "Let command know we'll need a flag ready. Presentation, full honors. And I want Colonel McAdams on site for it." "Copy that." She looked at Moore. "We'll need 10 minutes after the last flyover." Moore nodded. Willy sat again, though this time someone brought him a bottled water and a shade umbrella, which he quietly declined. A small girl approached and handed him a drawing she'd made. Crayon lines of jets and a stick figure holding a flag. He stared at it for a while. Then, with hands steadier than they should have been, he folded it gently and slipped it into his jacket pocket. The final flyover boomed above, tight formation, perfect timing, the noise rattling teeth and hearts alike. A great American spectacle. But the eyes weren't on the jets anymore. They were on him. And then, from across the runway, a golf cart approached. Colonel Rachel McAdams stepped out in full dress blues, her medals glinting in the sunlight, posture crisp as iron. She was a pilot's pilot. No nonsense. Fiercely respected. When she saw Willy, her stride slowed. She didn't extend a hand. She stood at attention. "Staff Sergeant Jennings," she said, loud enough for those in the front rows to hear, "on behalf of the United States Air Force and all those who've ever flown with a voice in their ear telling them where home is, thank you." Willy looked at her. Then, slowly, he stood again. The salute they exchanged wasn't for the cameras. It was for those who never made it home to see one. Behind them, the flag team was assembling. The ceremony was about to begin. And for the first time in years, Willy Jennings wasn't just a face in the crowd. He was the reason the crowd had turned around. The wind softened as the flag team stepped forward. Their movements were exact, practiced. Boots hit the tarmac in perfect rhythm. The folded flag was carried between two honor guards, the triangle of stars and blue pressed crisp against their gloves. Colonel McAdams stood to the side now, eyes forward, her hands behind her back. Silence rippled out like a shockwave. Every whisper, every footstep, even the drone of aircraft systems powering down in the distance seemed to fade. Willy stood without needing to be asked. No ceremony had ever been planned for him. Not for his return from Vietnam, not for the decades of forgotten service, but now, under a sky carved by jets and reverence, the moment came, l'étain, not with a command, but with respect. One of the junior honor guards stepped toward him with careful precision and lowered her voice. "Slid Staff Sergeant Jennings, may I present this flag on behalf of a grateful nation?" Willie took it into his hands, his fingers brushing the cotton like it was sacred parchment. For him it was, not a symbol, not a gesture. This was the weight of friends, the memory of voices lost in jungle nights, call signs that never answered back. The folded flag pressed against his chest, and for the first time in a long time, he closed his eyes and let himself feel the years. He didn't cry, but his shoulders shifted like they'd let something go. Behind him, Avery watched with her lips pressed tight, a quiet ache blooming in her chest. Moore beside her said nothing, his arms crossed, eyes fixed straight ahead, jaw working. These were military people, not cold, but trained. And yet here, in this moment, the uniform didn't stop the emotion. Then, as if cued by something deeper than a program, the audience began to move. A veteran in a wheelchair wheeled himself up to the barricade and raised a trembling hand in salute. A woman in a red dress placed her hand over her heart. The boy took off his baseball cap. One by one they stood. Not for a show, not for entertainment, but because the presence of this man, this quiet, uninvited soul, had changed something in the air. In them. The announcer didn't speak. He let the moment breathe. Colonel McAdams stepped forward once more. "I'd like to request a moment of silence," she said, "for the men Staff Sergeant Jennings served with, for those who didn't come home, and for those who did but carried the war with them." Silence fell again, but this time it held weight. Then, from the far side of the field, a low hum began to rise. A single C-130, the kind that carried Willie and countless others through hostile skies, approached from the south. It wasn't part of the regular airshow schedule. Someone had pulled strings. Maybe Moore, maybe Avery, maybe McAdams herself. It didn't matter. The big bird banked gracefully and dipped one wing in a solemn pass. Willie looked up. His hand rose again, slowly, and this time everyone followed. From the vendors to the VIPs, from toddlers on shoulders to elderly vets in faded caps. Every hand lifted. It wasn't about rank now, or war, or medals. It was about remembrance. Avery leaned in, whispering so only he could hear. "You didn't ask for this, did you?" "No," Willie said softly, "but maybe it was time." Later, after the crowd thinned, after the applause returned in gentle bursts and people began to drift toward hot dogs and autograph booths again, Willie sat in the shade of a pop-up tent. He'd refused a chair under the main pavilion, too fancy. Someone brought him iced tea, someone else a slice of cherry pie wrapped in foil. He didn't eat it right away, just sat, the flag in his lap, watching the sky like it still owed him stories. Ethan found him there. He came running, out of breath, freckles dusted across his face and his hair all askew like he'd been searching for hours. When he saw the flag, he slowed. His eyes widened. "Grandpa, was that you?" Willie didn't answer. He didn't need to. Ethan sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I saw the jet move," the boy said. "I saw everyone stop." "They did all that because of you?" Willie smiled, tired but proud. "Not because of me, kiddo. Because they remembered." "Remembered what?" Willie placed a hand on his grandson's knee. "That freedom ain't just handed out. It's carried. By people, by names on walls, by the ones who never got a welcome home." Ethan looked down at the flag, then back at his grandfather. "I'm going to tell my friends about this," he said. "You do that," Willie replied. Avery came by once more before the sun dipped. She didn't say much, just handed him a small envelope with a silver seal. Inside was a certificate. It read, In recognition of Staff Sergeant William E. Jennings, USAF, for valor, sacrifice, and a life of quiet service. This chair is yours, now and always. Willy traced the text with his finger, then tucked the envelope behind the drawing in his pocket. The next year, when the Lincoln Air Show returned, the program looked different. A section of seating was marked off not for VIPs, not for sponsors, but for Willy Jennings. A single chair, bolted to the ground, wrapped in an American flag ribbon, sat at the edge of the field with a plaque that read, "For the ones who didn't ask to be remembered, but finally were." Willy still came. Bill sat in the same spot, and every time the F-22 peeled off from formation, dipping a wing toward the crowd, he lifted his hand to the brim of his cap. Because the sky, after all these years, finally remembered his name.